I stood in a fast food restaurant parking lot, staring at the cigarette in my left hand. I could hear my partner, Todd, finishing up his meal of about a dozen soft tacos in the cab of the ambulance. The night air was cool compared to the warmth of the day. Cicadas buzzed in the trees. The faint sound of voices came from the fast food drive-thru as food was exchanged for money. An occasional car passed on the road. I held up a Zippo lighter in my right hand, the lid still closed. The lighter had a shell that made it look like the Necronomicon from the Evil Dead movies. After struggling to quit smoking for over a year, I had stumbled across the lighter on Etsy and bought it right away. Now, every time I opened the lighter, it was like opening the Necronomicon. I was unleashing evil into the world. Or, more specifically, I was releasing evil into my lungs with every puff of a cancer stick. Still, the draw was strong. I wanted to insert the filter between my lips, release the evil from the Necronomicon, and breathe that evil in, filling my lungs with it. I wanted to, but I wouldn't let myself. Not this time. Not anymore.
I don't know why you just don't throw them away,
Todd said, crumpling up his trash and burping.
You wouldn't be tempted if you just threw the cigarettes away. Why don't you just bring your own lunch like I do?
I asked, still staring at the cigarette.
You wouldn't be tempted to eat all that junk if you brought your own lunch. I like this junk,
Todd said defensively.
It tastes good. Yeah? Well, so does smoking,
I said.
And fast food is probably just as bad for you. Yeah, well, we all gotta die someday,
Todd said. We had a variation of this same conversation at least once a month. We'd been working together for so long, it seemed as if we were just cycling through the same old conversations again and again because we had nothing new to talk about. But that was fine with me. I liked Todd, and we made a good team. I wouldn't want another partner. No way. As Todd got out, trekking across the parking lot to throw his trash away, I slipped the cigarette between my lips, lit the lighter, touched the flame to the tobacco, and inhaled the evil. Shame flooded my mind like blood into clean water, but the sensation of the smoke in my lungs dampened the emotion momentarily. I inhaled again greedily, stuffing the Necronomicon back into my pants pocket. Then the radio squawked to life in the cab, and I heard dispatch say our unit number. We had a call. Shit. I inhaled, tossed the cigarette down, stomped on it, and whistled for Todd. He tossed his garbage into the trash can and hurried back as I jumped into the cab. I was still exhaling a little smoke as he hit the gas, and we headed for the call. The house was in a neighborhood halfway between rural and urban. The nearest neighbors were a good 100 yards away in either direction, and the house itself was bordered by both a fence and a line of privacy trees. Todd guided the ambulance down the driveway, which was a narrow strip of asphalt. The lawn flanking the driveway was well cared for, and the 2-story house glowed against the night. Scanning for signs of trouble, I saw none. Todd had shut the siren off, but the flashing lights painted the night as we approached. I expected someone to come out of the house to greet us, but the well-lit front door remained shut as we came to a stop behind an SUV and a truck parked in the driveway against a closed garage door. Dispatch hadn't had a ton of information to give, so we didn't really know what we'd need. It was even possible that the call had been a prank. But when the 911 operator who'd taken the call couldn't reach anyone when calling back, we'd been summoned to investigate. The operator said he didn't even hear any talking when the call came through, only screams that were cut off by strange noises. The operator said these strange noises sounded like wet, splattering sounds. We'd been nearby, a lucky coincidence, and it had only taken us a few minutes to get here. Todd and I grabbed our bags and hustled toward the front door. Just as we got to the porch, the portable radio on my hip came to life. Todd and I paused, listening to dispatch telling us to wait until backup arrived to go inside. We shared a look, and I already knew that Todd would be going in with or without me. So I didn't give it a second thought. I moved onto the porch with my partner.
Hello?
I called after knocking.
EMS, anyone there?
There was a thump from the second floor. It sounded like someone tripping and falling, but after that, there was nothing but silence.
Try the door.
Todd said. I did as he suggested and found that the door was unlocked. I swung it open and called in again.
Hello?
There was no answer. Lights lit the entryway, allowing us to see inside. There was a hallway leading off the entryway, with a staircase side on to the front door about halfway down the hall. We stepped inside. It had a cozy, lived-in feel. There was a shoe rack next to a plush rug. Above that, there was a rack for hanging coats and jackets. Todd sniffed.
You smell that?
Yeah, I said, throat thickening. It was the smell of freshly spilled blood. There was a set of double doors on the right beyond the entryway. I approached it and knocked.
Hello? EMS?
Nothing. I reached down and opened one of the doors, glancing inside. It was a slaughterhouse. My stomach convulsed at the sight in the living room. I had to swallow hard to keep from vomiting. The entire room was splashed with blood. Walls, ceiling, furniture, bookcase, and even the flat-screen television on the wall. Body parts littered the floor. Entrails and organs were draped across the two couches and the love seat like macabre decorations in a scare house. The people were in so many parts, it was impossible to tell how many there had been.
God damn!
Todd said, pushing past me to step into the room. With his instincts taking over, he started toward what was left of the most intact body, which wasn't much. Then he stopped. He looked down to see that he was standing in blood. The stuff was still dripping from the furniture. He had gloves on, we both did, but we would be coated in the stuff in a second. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that there was nothing we could do for any of these people, and we both knew it. Todd was a paramedic, and I was an EMT, which meant Todd had done more schooling and could use more advanced medical techniques than me. But even with his schooling and experience, there was nothing he could do for these people. A droplet of blood dripped from the ceiling, hitting Todd in the head. He looked up to see what had happened just as another droplet fell.
Oh, fuck!
He said, bringing one gloved hand to his face as he doubled over.
It's in my eye!
Come on, I said, grabbing him and pulling him out of the room. I brought him over to the stairs and sat him down, setting my radio aside to get it out of the way as I worked. Then I pulled a bottle of eye wash and a couple of tissues from my bag. I gave him the tissues to hold under his eye and quickly washed the blood out.
Fucking blood on the ceiling,
he said.
God damn, how does that even happen? I mean, those people look like they exploded.
There was another thump from upstairs, very similar to the first one we heard while outside. Both of us froze and looked up the stairs.
Hello?
Todd called.
We should get the hell out of here until the police show up,
I said.
What about the person that called 911?
Todd asked.
Maybe that's them upstairs. And maybe it's the person who killed all those people in that room. How? I've never seen any weapon that can do something like that and not leave some evidence. That room was untouched except for the blood and guts and body parts. There was no explosion there, and it certainly wasn't a knife or a gun. Just because we don't know what caused it doesn't mean we should hang around, I said. Todd wiped his cheek and looked up at me. I knew I wouldn't win this argument. Todd was like that. He'd been in trouble several times for going into a scene after we'd been told to wait for the police to show up. And while he'd also put my life in danger on those occasions, he never forced me to get out of the ambulance. He always said, "You can stay here if you want. This is my thing. I'm going in." Now, that tendency was on full display. I sighed. Fine, let's go see.
But as soon as we started up the stairs, I heard tires screeching from outside. The police had arrived. At least, that's what I thought at first. Todd and I came back down the stairs and stood facing the still open front door. Footsteps came pounding up to the door, and a man wearing a baby blue button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up appeared, stepping inside. He had a gun in one hand. I quickly scanned for a badge, but didn't see one. He wasn't wearing a jacket either. He looked like he worked in an office building as an accountant or something. Behind him came another man dressed similarly, also holding a gun. The first man spotted us immediately.
"Don't move,"
he said, drifting toward the living room doors.
"Who are you?"
I asked. The first guy ignored me as the second one stepped through the front door. They both paused next to the living room, looking at the bloody mess inside. Then they looked at us.
"My name is Agent Donovan,"
the second guy said, coming toward us with his gun still out but pointed down.
"This is Agent Winslow."
Donovan looked to be in his early 30s, with dark hair buzzed close to the scalp. Winslow was maybe 10 years older, his longer hair parted at the side, showing signs of gray creeping into the brown.
"Can we see some ID?"
Todd asked. He was still holding the tissues I'd given him when washing out his eye.
"You get hurt?"
Donovan asked, gesturing at the tissues, which were pink from the eye wash and blood.
"Nope,"
Todd said.
"How about that ID?"
That thump came again from upstairs. Donovan and Winslow both looked that way.
"Who else is in the house?"
Donovan asked.
"We haven't been up there yet,"
I said.
"We were about to go see if anyone else was hurt when you showed up. We thought you were the police." "Those people aren't hurt,"
Winslow said, moving towards us at the stairs.
"They're in fucking pieces." "Stay here, don't go anywhere,"
Donovan said. Then both he and his partner moved up the stairs. When they were out of earshot, Todd turned to me.
"Have you ever seen any feds that look like that?" "Sure, on TV." "My point exactly. Feds in real life wear ill-fitting suits and thick ties, not business casual office wear. Maybe they're undercover or something."
Todd shook his head.
"I don't like this. It stinks. Why would he dodge my question about his ID?"
I was about to answer when gunshots came from upstairs. We both jumped at the sounds.
"Christ!"
Todd said.
"Let's wait outside." "Fine with me,"
I said, looking over my shoulder, suddenly afraid we'd be shot in the back by some lurking psycho. We took our bags and headed toward the front door.
"Hey!"
Donovan called out as we reached the front door. I turned and saw him coming down the stairs.
"I said stay put." "We were just going to wait outside until we got the all clear,"
I said.
"It's fine,"
he replied.
"You're not in any danger. Just follow me back here. We're going to have some questions for you guys." "You're not going to check the rest of the house first?"
Donovan moved to the end of the hallway and disappeared. He was back a few moments later.
"There,
He snapped.
all clear. Happy?"
Todd and I glanced at each other. He was right. Something didn't smell right. And it wasn't just all the blood and entrails in the living room. Still, we both moved down the hallway toward the back of the house, gestured on by Donovan. As we came next to the stairwell, I glanced up to see Winslow halfway up it, staring down at us as we passed. He still had his gun out. For that matter, so did Donovan. Once we passed the stairs, I could hear Winslow coming down behind us.
"So, how about that ID?"
Todd asked as we turned into the kitchen dining room area.
"Sure thing,"
Donovan said.
"As soon as you take a seat, I'll show you my badge and ID."
I glanced over my shoulder to see Winslow step into the kitchen, his gun still drawn.
"That'll sure make me feel better,"
Todd said.
"Won't it make you feel better, Danny?"
As soon as I'd seen Winslow on the stairs like that, I had a bad feeling deep in my bowels. And as soon as Todd called me Danny, I knew he felt it too. We were in deep shit. Todd and I had been working together for long enough to have developed a code. When dealing with erratic patients, mentally ill people with violent tendencies, or anyone who might pose a threat to our safety, we had a way of telling each other to be on edge. And we did it by calling each other names different from our own. I'd call Todd Larry, and he'd call me Danny. This worked because we only had our last names embroidered on our uniform shirts. Most of the time, this was a way to tell each other to tackle and subdue a frenzied patient, or for one of us to alert the other that we could be in danger. This time, I wasn't sure what Todd was planning, just that he was going to do something, and I'd better be ready. So as we approached the dining room table at the far side of the kitchen, Todd and I were walking side by side, each of us carrying a jump bag. Donovan was slightly behind us, following along. Winslow was a few steps behind Donovan. We were still a pace from the table when Todd whipped around, yelling for me to run as he slammed his jump bag into Donovan's face. Thinking that Todd would follow close behind, I booked it out of the dining room, dropping my jump bag as I went toward the only other door in the place, the one toward the living room. But even as I made the move to go, I glanced over to see Winslow raising his gun toward me. Todd jumped toward the man, getting in the way as he reached out to grab Winslow's hand. The gun fired. Blood splattered my face, and I felt something punch into my arm. Then I was in the living room, realizing with sickening horror that the blood on my face belonged to Todd. He'd been shot in the chest, and a chunk of his back had blown out with the bullet. I lunged over the blood-splattered couch, nearly slipping on a pool of drying blood as I stepped off the large area rug and onto the hardwood floor. A gunshot sounded behind me as I came to the double doors, one of which was still open. I ducked instinctively, hearing the bullet thunk into the wall beside the doorway. Then several more gunshots sounded from the kitchen. I winced, thinking that those bullets were going into Todd. I turned left and made it through the front door, legs and heart pumping as I ran toward the rig. We always kept the keys inside when on calls, so there was no risk of losing them. As I approached the rig, more gunshots sounded from behind me. A bullet punched into the windshield. Another hit the front right tire. The ambulance sank down with a hiss of escaping air. Still, it was my best bet for escape. I rounded to the driver's side and opened the door as the windshield exploded with the impact of rapid-fire bullets. As I ducked down to avoid getting shot in the head, I saw both Donovan and Winslow moving in unison, firing their pistols. I couldn't take the ambulance, not now. Panic flushed my veins and got my legs moving. I ran toward the edge of the yard, keeping the ambulance between me and the two shooters. I burst through the line of privacy trees, hitting a low wooden post and rail fence. Flipping over, I landed in the neighbor's yard on my back. The firing had stopped for now, but I knew it wasn't safe. I scrambled to my feet and ran across the yard, heading diagonally toward the road. As I crossed the road and ran into another yard, I tasted blood. I was sweating, and Todd's blood was running down my face, some of it getting into my mouth. I also noted a throbbing pain in my upper right arm, where something hit me just after Todd had been shot. I wasn't sure if it was the bullet or a piece of my friend's bone that was inside my body. None of it mattered right now. I ran past the house, thankful they didn't have a fence around the backyard. I raced into the woods, trying to picture how much woodland there was before I'd run into more civilization. I ducked around trees and nearly tripped over branches in the dim moonlight that filtered through the canopy. After several minutes of this, I had to stop to catch my breath. Hunkering down behind a long dead fallen tree, I turned and faced the way I'd come, looking for any sign of the two men. After a few moments, I saw them coming through the trees. I knew I couldn't run any longer, at least not with any speed. My chest heaved, and my legs shook with fear and fatigue. Hiding was my only chance. It was clear from the way Donovan and Winslow were creeping through the woods that they hadn't seen my hiding spot. Yet.
You guys just had to go in, didn't you?
Donovan called.
It wasn't even 5 minutes after the call went out, was it? We could have avoided this whole thing if you just listened to dispatch when they said to wait. You brought this on yourselves.
I said nothing and tried to get my breathing under control.
Listen,
Donovan yelled.
I saw your name tag. I know your last name is Winthrop. It won't be hard to find your address and your family. But we can avoid all that nastiness if you just come on out.
They scanned the woods as I peeked over the tree trunk, my head half hidden by branches. The joke was on them. I didn't have any family in the area, and barely any friends. I was a loner. a shut-in when I wasn't working. Todd and his family were my only friends. His wife Gina was like the sister I never had, and his 2 grade school-aged sons were like my nephews. But now Gina was a widow, and both Roy and Wayne had lost their father. The memory of a fist-sized hole blasting out of Todd's back played in my head on repeat as Donovan and Winslow got closer. When they were about 20 yards away, Winslow moved close to his partner and said, "We don't have time for this shit. We have to get back there and finish the last one off. If it gets away, we're fucked." "What about him?" Donovan said. "He could be infected." "Could be, yeah. But we've got a couple of hours before anything happens. We go back, take care of the last one at the house, burn the place down, and then we go find this asshole's family. Once we have his wife or dad or whatever, he'll come forward." For a moment, it looked like Donovan was going to agree. A glimmer of hope broke through the clouds of my confusion and fear. Then the younger man spoke. "No, he's here somewhere. He's close. You go back, take care of the house, and then call me. If I haven't found him by the time you're done, we'll go after his family." The clouds closed again, plunging my mind into darkness. "Yeah, all right," Winslow said. "Be careful." He turned and left, leaving the dark-haired man behind. Donovan started forward, gun held in front of him with both hands. I had no idea how many bullets he had left. They'd fired a lot at me while I was escaping, but I couldn't depend on him running out of bullets. For all I knew, he'd already loaded a new magazine or clip, or whatever it was called. I had to do something. I was finally catching my breath, but he was too close now. As soon as I started running, he could shoot me in the back. But I had to do something. I couldn't just die out here in these woods. I thought about throwing a rock over in the woods to distract him, but I doubted it would work. That kind of thing only worked in movies, and even then, it always made me groan with disbelief. A bolt of sickening pain engulfed my right arm, the injured one. Unable to help myself, I cried out. "Got you now, motherfucker," Donovan said. I barely registered it. My arm felt like it was being torn from my body, and as I looked down, I found that was exactly what was happening. My skin stretched at my elbow as my forearm separated from my upper arm, as though tugged slowly by some invisible force. I cried out again, unable to take my eyes off it. The stretching skin started splitting in places, but instead of looking like normal skin being torn, it looked like warm wax, stringy and dripping. Finally, the forearm fully separated, and I watched it scurry off into the woods, my fingers propelling it like a spider's legs. The stringy skin wax sealed over my nub, like it already had time to heal. Donovan stepped up on the other side of the fallen tree, smiling and pointing his gun at me. Dragging my gaze away from what was left of my arm, I looked up into the man's face, and I watched his smile falter when he saw that half my right arm was gone. "That's impossible," he said with fear in his voice. "It hasn't even been an hour." I had nothing to say. It was as if my mind had gone blank. Donovan's face transformed once again, this time shifting from fear to determination. He aimed the pistol at my head and fired. I awoke to the sound of a phone buzzing. Pulling in a breath and pulling myself up at the waist, I peered around in surprise, looking for Donovan. My skull throbbed like a jackhammer was inside it, pounding into my brain. The last thing I remembered was Donovan firing a gun directly at my head. I raised my right hand to my face, feeling for damage. My face was fine. Then I realized I was using my right hand, holding it out and looking down at it. I saw no evidence that it had ever separated. The only logical explanation was that I'd hallucinated the whole thing. I heard my phone vibrating. I reached for my phone. I pulled it out to see that I'd missed several calls from my boss, but there was no call coming through now. Yet the buzzing continued. Getting to my feet, I peered over the fallen tree to see Donovan lying on the ground, his face discolored and his throat collapsed. He was dead. His gun lay nearby, and it was his phone that was vibrating. It was clear I hadn't hallucinated anything, but that left many questions to be answered. I recalled Donovan and Winslow's plan, and I guessed the phone ringing was Winslow calling to say he was finished at the house. So it was only a matter of time before the guy came looking for his partner. After jumping over the fallen tree, I grabbed Donovan's phone and his pistol. His body was still warm, and his bulging, bloodshot eyes stared past me as I went through his pockets. I looked for car keys but found none. I also looked for a wallet, but he didn't have one on him. Once I was done, I moved through the woods, heading away from the neighborhood where it had all started. I was tempted to call 911, but something Donovan had said gave me pause. He'd said something about Todd and me arriving at the house only minutes after the initial call went out, and about us not listening when dispatch told us to wait. How could he know that, unless he had some sort of inside information? Maybe he was using a police scanner. If that was the case, I knew Winslow would hear any call that went out over the radio. So instead of calling 911, I decided to call a woman I knew from dispatch, a woman who owed me a favor. I knew that Teresa's shift had ended not 15 minutes ago. She'd be on her way home. I pulled up a map of the area on my phone and started heading to a neighborhood on the other side of the woods. Then I called her.
Curtis, what the hell is going on?
She said.
Pullman has been trying to reach you guys. Where have you been?
Where are you? I asked Teresa.
I'm just leaving the station. What's going on?
I need your help. Someone's after me. They killed Todd.
What? Jesus Christ, Curtis. Are you serious? Call the police.
I can't. I think they're monitoring the radio frequencies.
So we'll tell them to stay off the...
Just listen. Something strange is going on, I said. I need you to come pick me up. Now. No more questions, okay? Teresa sighed.
Okay,
She said.
give me the address.
I told her where to meet me and then continued on my way through the woods, looking back over my shoulder every few steps. As I went, I realized that my upper arm no longer hurt. I reached up and felt the hole in my uniform sleeve, but the skin underneath felt intact. Whatever had hit me when Todd was shot was gone now. What the fuck was happening to me? Donovan's phone buzzed in my pocket. I switched the pistol from my right hand to my left and then retrieved the phone. There was a text message on the screen. There were only 3 words on it that I could see, but it was really all I needed to see. Winthrop, you're infected. The message was from a number without a name, but I knew it could only be from one person, Winslow. He must have found Donovan. Since the phone was locked, I couldn't open it to answer the message. Not that I wanted to, but still, those words sent a freezing chill down my spine. The blood, it had dripped from the ceiling into Todd's eye. Then, when he'd been shot, his blood had splattered on my face. And maybe it had even gotten into my system when a bone fragment or bullet hit me in the right arm. But there were only minutes between those 2 events. What kind of disease could travel through the body that fast? No, it wasn't possible. None of this was possible. The phone buzzed again with another message. You're putting everyone in danger. I swallowed, thinking about how my arm had come off. The thought of it made me giggle. I'm going crazy. The phone buzzed again. Come back, I can help you. I thought for a moment about calling the number on my phone. After all, I could see the entire number at the top of each text message. But when I looked up, I spotted a line of houses not far ahead. I was almost to the neighborhood. Once I was safely in Teresa's car, I could think about what to do. I knew Winslow didn't want to help me. He wanted to kill me. But what if I was infected with some crazy disease? What if I had hallucinated my arm coming off to deal with killing Donovan while I was blacked out? This is crazy. Fucking insane, I thought, looking down at my arm. I put the phone away and tucked the pistol in my back waistband as I came to a home's backyard. I hopped the fence and ran through to the front yard. When I came out on the street, I looked at the numbers and saw that the address I'd given Teresa was several houses down. I hustled down the street and stood in a spot between 2 streetlights where there was some degree of darkness. A few minutes later, headlights came around the curve. Peering at them, unable to tell if they belonged to Teresa's RAV4 I reached for the gun at my back. When the vehicle slowed as it approached, I saw it was Teresa's. I jumped in as soon as she stopped.
Curtis!
She said, staring at me.
It's not my blood.
I said, realizing she was looking at the blood on my face.
It's Todd's. We really need to go.
Where are we going?
The nearest police station, I guess. If I can talk to them in person and tell them the situation, maybe they can do something without alerting the guy.
What guy? Tell me what the hell is going on.
Okay, just drive and I'll tell you.
Teresa nodded and turned around in a driveway. As we made our way out of the neighborhood, I told her everything, even the stuff about my arm and the guy shooting me in the face.
Well, you obviously weren't shot in the face,
she said when I was done.
And your arm didn't come off, so it's gotta be a hallucination.
Exactly,
I said.
Maybe something inside that house? Some kind of poison? I don't know.
Teresa started to say something, then seemed to think better of it.
What?
I said.
Spit it out.
Todd's really dead?
She asked. Her voice quivered. I nodded.
Yeah, he really is.
Teresa and I had dated for 2 years before calling it quits 6 months ago. Although we didn't see much of each other anymore, we still talked fairly often. And we still had to work together, her in dispatch and me in a rig. But during our time dating, she got to know Todd and his family just as well as I did. We were always over at their house on days off, cooking dinner and playing with the kids and sharing war stories. And now Todd was gone. Even though we dealt with death pretty much every day, it didn't make things any easier when someone close to you died. In some ways, it made things worse. Because there was always that lingering thought that there was something more we could have done. We were in the business of saving lives, after all. We drove on in silence for several minutes. Then Donovan's phone buzzed again. I pulled it out and looked, and the bottom fell out of the world. It was an address, Todd's address, where Gina, Roy, and Wayne were at right now.
We need to go to Todd's house,
I said, barely able to get my voice above a whisper.
What?
Todd's house,
I said, a little louder.
We need to get there, fast.
I held out the phone for her to see.
Curtis, we need to go to the police,
Teresa said.
You can't do this on your own. We can't do this. This isn't some movie. We need help from people who know what to do in these situations.
He's going to kill them!
I shouted.
And he'll kill you too if you go there without the police.
I glared at Teresa, keenly aware of Donovan's pistol pressing against my lower back. My friend kept her eyes forward as she drove along the near-deserted street. She was probably right. But I played that out in my mind. Would the police be able to negotiate with Winslow? Or would he just kill Todd's family and then himself when he saw he was cornered? What if he truly was a spook? Would he be able to call in some favor and get the whole thing covered up? What if he was right, and I really was infected with something? I had hallucinated in the woods. There was no doubt about that. And somehow, I had taken Donovan out. Or someone had. I just couldn't remember what had really happened. I reached up to my uniform shirt and dragged my pack of smokes out of my breast pocket. But as I reached for the Necronomicon lighter in my pocket, Teresa stared at the cigarettes. I froze for a moment, then said,
Pull over.
What? Why?
After sticking the pack of cigarettes back in my pocket, I reached behind my back and pulled the gun out. I didn't point it at her, not directly, but I aimed it near her.
Pull over, Teresa, now.
Jesus, Curtis,
she said, with disbelief in her voice. She pulled to the side and slowed to a stop. I forced her out of the car and said,
Call the police. Give them Todd's address. You remember where it is?
I think so.
I recited the address as I moved around and got behind the wheel.
Sorry,
I said out the open window.
but it's just better this way. Just call the police.
You know the response time in that area,
Teresa said.
You know they won't get there before you.
That's what I'm counting on. I hit the gas and pulled away, leaving Teresa on the side of the 2-lane road, standing in the uncut grass. Without thinking too much about it, I pulled a cigarette out of my pack and then reached for my Necronomicon lighter. but just as my fingers touched the lighter, I saw myself in the mirror. I still had Todd's blood on my face. I pulled my hand out of my pocket without the lighter, and then crushed the unlit cigarette in my hand, tossing it out the window.
God damn you,
I said.
You better not touch them. You better leave them the fuck alone.
I kept my eyes on the road as I closed in on Todd's house.
What guarantee do I have that you'll let them go?
I asked Winslow over the phone. I had called him on my phone, getting the number from the texts I saw on Donovan's.
I don't want to hurt anyone,
Winslow said. He'd already let me hear Gina's voice. He had them all right. He was holding them hostage.
I just can't have you running around out there, infecting other people. You haven't infected anyone else, have you?
How the hell should I know?
Have you bled on anyone?
No.
Has anything strange happened?
What does that mean?
I asked.
The only thing strange was you two assholes killing my partner in the damn hallucinations.
What hallucinations?
Winslow asked.
I'm not hearing any kind of guarantee,
I said.
How do I know you won't just kill them if I turn myself in?
You're talking like you hold the cards,
Winslow said.
but you and I both know that I have the royal flush, while you have a pair of twos.
Bullshit,
I said.
I can always go find someone to bleed on. Would you prefer that?
Silence answered me over the phone. It lasted for long enough that my guts started to coil into themselves.
I'm going to shoot the little one if you're not here in 10 minutes,
Winslow said.
I'll be there in 5. And god damn it, you better let them go.
I hung up the phone and raced through Todd's property, heading the back way toward the house. He lived out in the country on 15 acres of land. But I knew the area, and I knew where the trail was, and I knew how to get to the house from the back road. I just had to hope that Winslow would be too busy watching the front to notice me coming up the back. I carried the gun in my right hand, but I hoped I wouldn't have to use it. I wasn't any kind of marksman. I hadn't even fired a gun in years, and when I last had, it was a rifle. 5 minutes later, when I reached the back of the house and peered through the window, I saw that I was screwed. Because it wasn't just Winslow in the house. He had brought friends. 2 of them, dressed similarly to him. From where I was, I could only see the 2 men standing nearby and Gina, and I couldn't even see all of her, just the top of her head. They were all in the living room, of which I could only see a slice through the doorway from the kitchen. The top of Gina's head was visible over the back of the recliner there. The 2 men paced back and forth in the living room. For all I knew, there were several other men around. I had no choice but to turn myself in and hope for the best.
God damn it,
I muttered, taking a breath and setting the gun on the ground.
Well, here goes nothing.
I reached up to knock on the window, but before I could, my arm extended up of its own accord and grabbed the top of the window frame. I tried to pull back, but my fingers refused to let go. The skin stretched at my elbow, just like it had back before Donovan died. I watched as my arm separated from my body and crawled up the side of the house to disappear onto the roof. The waxy skin sealed itself over my nub, leaving no blood or exposed bone. I stared at what was left of my arm, trying to convince myself I was hallucinating. But when I brought my other hand up and felt the nub, I knew it was real. A sound came from the roof, and my right hand came into view, jumping down to land gracefully on the patio near the back door. It quickly scurried over to the pet door, moving through the flap and into the house. I snapped to my senses, finally realizing what was happening. Banging on the window caught one guard's attention, and he pointed his gun at me from the living room as Gina raised her head and turned to look at me.
It's inside!
I shouted. A moment later, the guard shifted and fired twice toward the floor. I changed my angle to see my hand on the floor. It had taken a couple of bullets, blasting 2 of my fingers away. The limb lay twitching on the floor. The guard who'd shot it ran into the kitchen, approaching the limb even as Winslow shouted from elsewhere in the house for him to stay back. But it was too late. Before the guard could correct his mistake, the limb exploded, sending blood and meat everywhere. Much of it splattered the guard, getting all over his face. I looked at Gina, who was still turned in the recliner, peering with wide eyes over its back and into the kitchen. Her face was splattered with blood, too. My stomach lurched.
Oh no!
I said. Winslow appeared in the doorway, gun pointed at Gina's head. He pulled the trigger, blasting her brains out. Then he turned and shot the guard in the kitchen, killing him. Moving with swift efficiency, he located me in the window and fired. The glass shattered and the world went black. I awoke to the smell of gasoline. I looked up at the familiar ceiling, realizing immediately that I was in Todd's kitchen and that I was covered in gasoline. My head pounded, like it had after Donovan shot me. I knew now that it hadn't been a hallucination. I'd survived being shot in the head, twice. The guard's body lay nearby, where he'd fallen after Winslow shot him. Bits of my exploded arm were all over the place. I sat up and looked through the doorway to the living room. I couldn't see Gina, and I didn't want to. I looked down at my uniform, seeing that it was soaked in gas. The whole place had been doused in the stuff.
Don't move or I'll shoot you again,
a voice said from behind me. I turned to see Winslow standing outside the window I'd been looking through earlier. The glass had been smashed out, and Winslow held an unlit road flare in one hand, a pistol in the other.
The boys?
I asked.
Oh, so you're being reasonable now?
Winslow asked, still pointing the gun at me.
Are they okay? Or did you shoot them too?
They're fine, he said.
Why didn't you just tell me?
I asked, reaching up from my breast pocket with my one remaining hand.
I said don't move,
Winslow shouted.
They're just smokes,
I said, pulling the hard pack out of my gas-soaked pocket. Winslow tensed, but he didn't fire. I retrieved the one smoke that hadn't been soaked in gas and stuck it between my lips.
You gonna light that?
Winslow asked.
I will in a second. Just tell me why you didn't explain things to me in the first place. Oh, you think that would have worked? Excuse me, sir, but I'm afraid you've been infected by some kind of alien organism. If we don't burn your body, you will eventually explode and infect anyone nearby. But only after one or more of your arms or legs separates to try and find new hosts. Sorry, but hold still while we set you on fire. You think you would have agreed to that?
I considered this for a moment.
No, I guess not. You're right. If you and your partner would have just waited to go in, like you were told, we could have avoided this whole mess,
Winslow said.
But you just had to go in early, didn't you? A couple of regular heroes.
I reached awkwardly into my right pocket and pulled out the Necronomicon lighter.
Why explode? What's the purpose of that? That just kills the host, right? The organism can't survive long in the human body, or any terrestrial body for that matter. So before it dies, it tries to spread itself through the blood by exploding. That's the theory anyway. The scientists were the ones studying this thing before it escaped. I'm just a guy sent out to clean up a mess. So why didn't it infect your partner back in the woods? Why did it just kill him? And how could I have survived a gunshot in the head? Look, I just told you. I don't know how it all works. I'm guessing the organism hadn't fully taken hold of you yet, which is why it killed Donovan instead of trying to infect him. Or maybe it sensed that you were an ideal host, so it wanted to protect you for as long as possible. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. Did you really get shot? Or did your hand save you at the last moment? I was shot, I said. And you just shot me in the head, didn't you? So how come I survived getting shot, but Todd didn't? He was infected too. He did survive,
Winslow said.
What do you mean?
Winslow sighed.
You're going to make me say it? I shot him 5 more times in the head to give us some time to deal with you. By the time I got back to the house to set it on fire, his head had nearly regenerated. But you seem to regenerate much quicker. You must be the best host that thing has found yet.
Swallowing, I looked down at the lighter in my hand, then back up at Winslow.
You swear the boys are okay? I swear, they're fine. I had them removed as soon as I got here. I wasn't about to put a couple of kids in danger. no matter what I told you over the phone.
I nodded, then looked back down at the lighter in my left hand. I could feel my right leg doing something funny. It was trying to separate. I always figured smoking would kill me, I said. Then I opened the Necronomicon and sparked it up. My gas-soaked hand lit on fire, and the flames moved swiftly over my body as I lit the cigarette. I inhaled the evil as I tossed the still-lit lighter toward the living room. Flames whooshed to life there. Soon, I was engulfed. I took one last drag of the cigarette before I could no longer breathe. As the flames sizzled my flesh, I could feel the organism in my blood thrashing around, as if my blood was trying to escape the heat, but it had nowhere to go. I wanted to scream from the pain, but I had no oxygen to pull into my lungs. The fire was taking it all. So I thrashed until I suffocated, and the world went black once again. This time, for good. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.